Nobody at the 80,000-person concert expected anything like this. When Freddie Mercury saw a terminally ill mother in the crowd, he stopped everything. And what he did for that woman on stage turned her final days into a miracle that gave meaning to her last moments on Earth. Picture this: Hyde Park, London, September 18, 1976. Queen is headlining one of the largest free concerts in British history, and 80,000 people have gathered in the heart of London for what's being called the musical event of the year. The energy is electric, the autumn air is perfect, and Freddie Mercury is commanding the massive outdoor stage with his usual charismatic authority. But in the midst of this celebration of life and music, there's someone in the crowd for whom this isn't just entertainment. It's a final farewell to the world she's about to leave behind. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because what you're about to witness will break your heart and heal it at the same time, showing you why Freddie Mercury understood that music isn't just about performance, it's about giving meaning to the most profound moments of human existence. Tonight we're revealing the untold story of the Hyde Park miracle that had 80,000 people crying together, and proved that sometimes the greatest gift an artist can give isn't a perfect performance, but a perfect moment of human connection when time is running out. The story begins 6 months earlier in a small oncology ward at St. Thomas's Hospital, where 42-year-old Margaret Harrison received the devastating news that would change everything for her and her family. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer with an expected survival time of 6 to 9 months. The doctors were compassionate but clear. There was no cure, no treatment that would do more than slightly extend her time, and certainly no hope of recovery. Margaret had been a Queen fan from the very beginning, back when they were still playing small clubs and building their reputation song by song. Her daughter, 20-year-old Sarah Harrison, had grown up surrounded by Queen's music, with her mother playing their albums constantly and sharing her passion for the band's unique sound and Freddie's extraordinary voice. "My mum used to say that Freddie Mercury didn't just sing songs, he sang emotions," Sarah later recalled in a 2005 interview. She said his voice could express things that words alone never could, and that Queen's music made her feel alive in ways that nothing else did. As Margaret's condition deteriorated through the spring and summer of 1976, Queen's music became more than entertainment. It became her companion through pain, her distraction from fear, and her reminder that beauty still existed in a world that was becoming increasingly difficult to navigate. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, Margaret's oncologist, later spoke about the role that music played in her patient's final months. Margaret would come in for her appointments with Queen playing on her portable cassette player. Dr. Chen remembered, "She told me once that listening to Bohemian Rhapsody made her forget about dying for 6 minutes at a time, 6 minutes of feeling like a person instead of a patient." By September, Margaret's prognosis had shortened. The doctors were now talking about weeks rather than months. Her pain was becoming harder to manage, her energy was fading rapidly, and she was facing the reality that her time was measured in days that were slipping away faster than anyone wanted to acknowledge. That's when Sarah Harrison made a decision that would lead to one of the most profound moments in concert history. When she learned that Queen was playing a free concert in Hyde Park, close enough that even her increasingly frail mother might be able to attend, she became determined to make it happen, regardless of the obstacles. The obstacles were considerable. Margaret was in constant pain, her mobility was severely limited, and the idea of spending hours in a crowd of 80,000 people seemed medically inadvisable at best and dangerous at worst. But Margaret herself insisted that she wanted to go, wanted one final opportunity to hear Freddie Mercury sing live, wanted to be part of something joyful before the end. "When your mother is dying and asks for something that might bring her happiness," Sarah later explained, "you find a way to make it happen, no matter how impossible it seems." The preparation for the concert took weeks of planning. Sarah coordinated with Margaret's medical team to ensure they had appropriate pain medication, arranged for a wheelchair, mapped out the closest entrance to medical facilities, and even contacted concert organizers to explain the situation and ask for accommodation. Concert coordinator Michael Stevens later recalled receiving Sarah's letter. "We got hundreds of requests for special access for various reasons," Stevens remembered, "but there was something about Sarah's letter that stayed with me. She wasn't asking for VIP treatment or backstage passes. She just wanted to make sure her dying mother could hear Queen one last time without being in too much pain." Stevens arranged for a special viewing area near the medical tent where Margaret could watch the concert in her wheelchair without being overwhelmed by the massive crowd. It wasn't the best view, and it certainly wasn't close to the stage, but it would allow Margaret to be present, to hear the music she loved, and to experience one more concert before cancer took away her ability to leave her hospital bed. On the day of the concert, September 18th, Sarah and Margaret arrived at Hyde Park hours before Queen was scheduled to perform. The journey from the hospital had been exhausting for Margaret, and even sitting in the wheelchair, she was clearly in significant discomfort. But her eyes were bright with anticipation, and she kept smiling despite the pain. She was so happy to be there, Sarah recalled, despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, knowing that this was probably the last time she'd be outside in the world. She was genuinely, purely happy. That's when I knew we'd made the right decision. As the opening acts performed, and the crowd grew to its eventual 80,000-person capacity, Margaret sat in her wheelchair, soaking in the atmosphere. She watched the young people around her dancing and singing, remembering when she'd had that kind of energy, that kind of future ahead of her. But there was no bitterness in her observation, only gratitude that she was here now for this. Security guard James Mitchell was assigned to the medical area that day and noticed Margaret immediately. You could tell she was seriously ill, he later said, but you could also see this incredible determination in her eyes. She was there on sheer willpower, refusing to let her body's limitations steal this experience from her. When Queen finally took the stage and launched into their opening number, something remarkable happened. Margaret, who had been slumped in her wheelchair conserving her limited energy, suddenly sat up straighter. The music seemed to flow through her, temporarily pushing back the pain and fatigue that had become her constant companions. It was like watching someone come back to life. James Mitchell remembered, not literally of course, but spiritually, the music was doing something that medicine couldn't. It was making her feel like herself again. Sarah, watching her mother's transformation, felt tears streaming down her face. She had hoped this concert would bring her mother some joy, but she hadn't expected to see this kind of profound change, even if it was temporary. The concert proceeded magnificently for nearly an hour. Queen was in peak form. Freddie was commanding the massive outdoor venue with his usual theatrical brilliance, and Margaret Harrison was experiencing exactly what she'd hoped for. A few hours of feeling alive, feeling connected to something beautiful, feeling like a person rather than a dying patient. And then during a brief pause between songs while the band was adjusting their equipment, something unprecedented occurred. Freddie Mercury, scanning the massive crowd as he often did, noticed something unusual in the medical area. A woman in a wheelchair, clearly very ill, being supported by a younger woman who appeared to be crying. Even from the stage, Betty could sense that something profound was happening there, something that went beyond the typical concert experience. What happened next would be talked about by everyone present for the rest of their lives. Instead of launching into the next planned song, Freddie did something he'd never done before. At a concert of this size, he asked his crew to train a spotlight on the medical area, and he began speaking directly to Margaret Harrison, though he didn't yet know her name. "Ladies and gentlemen," Freddie announced, his voice carrying clearly across the massive park, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone special in our audience tonight." The crowd of 80,000 fell into confused silence, unsure what was happening. Margaret, suddenly illuminated by a spotlight, looked at Sarah in shock and confusion. "I can see there's someone in the medical area who came here tonight, despite what must be tremendous difficulty," Freddie continued, his voice taking on a gentleness that was unusual for his stage persona. "And I want that person to know that we see you, we honor your courage, and this next song is for you." Sarah later described the moment as surreal. "My mother looked at me with this expression of complete disbelief. She whispered, 'Is he talking about me?' And I could only nod because I was crying too hard to speak." But Freddie wasn't finished with his gesture. "In fact," he announced, "I think someone that brave deserves better than watching from the medical tent. Will the beautiful lady in the wheelchair join us on stage?" The crowd erupted in supportive applause, but Sarah's heart sank with concern. Her mother could barely sit upright in the wheelchair. How could she possibly manage being on stage in front of 80,000 people? But Margaret Harrison, with more determination than she'd shown in months, gripped her daughter's hand and whispered, "Help me get up there, please. I need to do this." What followed was an unprecedented mobilization of concert staff, medical personnel, and security to safely bring Margaret Harrison from the medical tent to the stage. Freddie waited patiently Freddie, refusing to continue the concert until this happened, keeping the massive crowd engaged with impromptu stories and jokes while the logistics were handled. Dr. Patricia Williams, a palliative care specialist who happened to be in the audience, later wrote about witnessing this moment. What Freddie Mercury did was remarkable from a medical standpoint. He was giving this woman an experience that would flood her system with endorphins and adrenaline, temporarily overriding her pain in a way that medication couldn't match. He was quite literally providing medical intervention disguised as entertainment. When Margaret finally reached the stage, wheeled carefully by Sarah and assisted by crew members, the crowd's applause was deafening. But Freddie immediately moved to create a bubble of intimacy in this very public space. He knelt beside Margaret's wheelchair, taking her hand and speaking to her quietly enough that only she, Sarah, and those immediately nearby could hear. "What's your name, love?" he asked gently. "Margaret," she replied, her voice weak but clear. "Margaret," Freddie repeated, making her name sound important. "How long have you been listening to Queen?" "Since the beginning," Margaret said, managing a smile despite her obvious fatigue. "You've been the soundtrack to my life, Freddie, the good parts and now the difficult parts too." Freddie's eyes filled with tears that he didn't try to hide. "Then this performance is for you, Margaret. Every note, every word, every moment. This is your concert." What happened next created one of the most emotionally powerful performances in rock history. Freddie dedicated the next 30 minutes of Queen's set to Margaret Harrison, frequently glancing over to where she sat on stage, drawing strength from her presence, infusing his performance with an emotional depth that had even band members crying. He performed "Love of My Life" with such tenderness that 80,000 people stood in respectful silence, understanding they were witnessing something sacred. He sang "Somebody to Love" directly to Margaret, as if answering the question the song posed. And when he performed their current hit, he transformed it from a stadium anthem into an intimate conversation between a performer and someone for whom this music represented everything. Concert photographer Dennis O'Regan captured the moment that would become iconic. Freddie Mercury kneeling beside Margaret Harrison's wheelchair, both of them illuminated by a single spotlight, her hand in his, 80,000 people bearing witness to this moment of profound human connection. But the most remarkable part of the evening was yet to come. After completing his dedicated set, Freddie made one final gesture that demonstrated why he was beloved, not just as a performer but as a human being. He removed his own scarf, the same scarf he wore at every performance as a personal talisman, and gently wrapped it around Margaret's shoulders. "Margaret," he said, speaking softly, but with his microphone catching every word, "I want you to keep this, and when you wear it, I want you to remember that tonight, 80,000 people celebrated your courage, your love of music, your refusal to let anything, not pain, not fear, not even death, stop you from experiencing beauty one more time." The standing ovation that followed lasted 12 minutes. 80,000 people applauding not for the rock star on stage, but for the dying woman who had fought to be there, who had chosen joy over despair, who had reminded everyone present that life is measured not in years, but in moments that take our breath away. Margaret Harrison passed away 6 days later, on September 24, 1976. She died in her hospital bed, wearing Freddie's scarf, with Queen playing softly in the background. Sarah was holding her hand. "In those final days, my mother talked constantly about the concert," Sarah later recalled. She said that Freddie had given her something she'd thought was impossible, a perfect moment at the end of an imperfect life. She said that his gesture had proven that even when you're dying, you can still matter to someone, you can still be seen, you can still experience magic. The impact of that September evening extended far beyond Margaret's personal experience. Video footage of Freddie's gesture spread through the music community, inspiring other artists to be more aware of fans facing terminal illnesses. Several organizations began programs to help dying patients attend concerts, directly inspired by Margaret's story. More immediately, the incident changed how Freddie approached his relationship with Queen's audiences. Band members reported that after the Hyde Park concert, he was even more attentive to individual faces in crowds, more aware that behind every pair of eyes was a human story, possibly someone for whom this concert represented something far more significant than entertainment. Sarah Harrison kept Freddie's scarf as her most treasured possession. When Freddie himself passed away in 1991, she had it framed alongside a photograph from that night, and a copy of the letter she'd written to him after her mother's death, thanking him for giving Margaret a perfect exact final public moment. The letter, later shared with Freddie's estate, read in part, "You gave my mother something that all her doctors, all her medications, and all our love couldn't provide. You gave her a reason to feel alive instead of dying. For 30 minutes on that stage, she wasn't a cancer patient. She was just Margaret, a woman who loved music, being honored by the artist she admired most. That gift was worth more than all the extra time in the world." Dr. Elizabeth Chen, Margaret's oncologist, began incorporating live music into her treatment philosophy after witnessing how profoundly the concert had affected her patients' final days. "Margaret taught me that medical care isn't just about extending life. It's about ensuring that whatever time patients have is filled with meaning and joy," she explained. The Hyde Park concert became a turning point in how the music industry approached accessibility for terminally ill fans. Venues and artists began developing protocols for accommodating fans with serious health conditions, ensuring that when someone's final wish is to attend a concert, that wish could be honored safely and with dignity. If this story moved you the way it moved those 80,000 people in Hyde Park, please hit that like button and share it with anyone who needs to be reminded that even at the end, there can be moments of perfect beauty, and that true artists understand their responsibility extends beyond entertainment into the realm of human compassion. What's the most meaningful final wish you've witnessed being granted? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible tales of how music provides meaning in our most profound moments. The Hyde Park concert of 1976 became more than just a musical event. It became a cultural touchstone for how society approaches end-of-life experiences. Medical professionals began citing Margaret's story in their training, using it as an example of how quality of life should be measured not just in physical comfort but in meaningful experiences that affirm a person's humanity. Concert venues across the UK and eventually worldwide began implementing compassionate access programs inspired directly by Margaret Harrison's story. These programs ensured that terminally ill fans could attend concerts safely, with medical support and appropriate accommodations. By 2020, over 50,000 people had attended concerts through such programs, each one experiencing their own version of the magic that Margaret felt that September evening. Brian May later reflected on the Hyde Park concert in his autobiography, describing it as the moment when Queen truly understood their purpose extended beyond entertainment. "We'd always known we could make people happy," he wrote, "but that night with Margaret taught us we could make people's final chapters meaningful. That's a responsibility we carried with us for the rest of our career." The scarf that Freddie gave Margaret became part of a traveling exhibition about music's healing power, displayed alongside Sarah's letter and photographs from that evening. Thousands of visitors each year stand before that simple piece of fabric and read Margaret's story, many leaving in tears, all of them reminded that compassion can transform suffering into something beautiful. Sarah Harrison eventually became a hospice volunteer, dedicating her life to ensuring other families could create meaningful final memories. "My mother taught me that dying doesn't have to mean giving up on joy," she explained in a 2019 interview. "And Freddie Mercury taught me that when someone offers you a chance to feel alive, you take it, regardless of how little time you have left." The magic continues here on our channel, where every story reminds us that life is measured not in duration, but in moments that remind us why being alive matters.